Chapter 4, Hoedown at Harris, between January and April of 2002. I went on the prison run in late January. Florence, Arizona is a small desert town whose main distinction is that it's home to the state's and nation's largest correctional facilities. Thousands of bikers stage up and slowly ride out to the prison complex in a massive pack of chrome, steel, leather, and denim to pay their respects to those unfortunate enough to be doing hard time. As the ragged column crawls past the yard, orange jumpsuited inmates caged behind thousands of feet of curlicue coat razor wire stand at parade rest while the bikers file past, saluting, hooting, and hollering. To establish some semblance of order, the law comes out in a show of force. Helicopters, anti-personnel vehicles, cruisers, motorcycles, SUVs, paddy wagons, the whole fleet. Varvel, who didn't go, was right. It was a sight to behold. I rolled with a confidential informant from another case out of Los Angeles. The CI's name was Mike Kramer, aka Mesa Mike. He was one of the few angels we ever got to flip, but at that time his case agent, ATF Special Agent John Ciccione, didn't know exactly why he flipped. At the run, Mesa Mike introed me to some of his closest friends. Mesa's angels Cal Schrafer, Kevin Arstenaki, Paul Eischit. He pointed out others from a distance, the Mesa president, Bad Bob, and his vice president, Whale, Smitty from Bullhead, who I easily recognized, and a huge guy named Chico out of the Phoenix Charter. Mesa Mike warned me never to tangle with Chico, that he'd kill anyone, cop, women, child, dog, bunny, rabbit, even a Hells Angels brother if he deserved it, without losing a wink of sleep. After the run, I returned to the Bullhead UC house. It was in a cul-de-sac named Verano Circle. The house was decorated like a bomb shelter for motorheads. I'd boarded the windows with plywood. Every door but the front was barricaded with 2x4s. The living room was a gym, full power track, dumbbells, free weights, heavy bag, speed bag. There was a red pipe wrench hanging next to the front door and a bulletproof vest hanging on the living room wall. I kept a machete and a shotgun in the closet. One corner of the house was stacked with sandbags. There was a pantry full of canned food, bottled water, 3 cases of Coors Light, and a large bottle of Jack Daniels. The purpose of all of this was to suggest that if the police came, I was going to hunker down and shoot it out, Butch Cassidy style. I continued to go to Tucson twice a week to coach Jack's games. I took a couple days in late March to sit around the pool in my backyard and live the good life. In the evenings, I played flashlight tag on the golf course with Jack, and then came inside and listened to my daughter, Dale, practice guitar. She was pretty good for a beginner. Gwen, stylish and forgiving, fawned over me in ways I didn't deserve. April rolled around. I went back to Bullhead. Another motorcycle rally, the river run in Laughlin, was gearing up. Since it was on my turf, I resolved to meet some of the local Hells Angels when it took place. At the time, ATF had some real interest in the Angels. In addition to Agent Ciccione's investigation, a well-known rock star of a case agent named Joseph Slatala was conducting a historical case based in Phoenix. This kind of case is built around existing police reports, warrants, affidavits, arrests, convictions, financial documents, and public records. Slats sought to prove that the Angels were a criminal organization, indictable under RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Slats knew the Angels had been in Arizona for a little under 5 years. He learned that before them, the state's top 1%ers were the Dirty Dozen. The Dozen had been violent and well established. They extorted money and committed violent acts. They trafficked in weapons and drugs. Their members had included Chico and Bad Bob. The Angels came onto their turf when Ralph Sonny Barger, the iconic godfather of the Hells Angels, retired his 40-year presidency in Oakland, California. He'd served a prison term in the Phoenix area and had fallen in love with the climate and the state. Leaving Oakland, he relocated to Cave Creek, Arizona, a suburb north of Phoenix. With him came the Hells Angels, and with them came the intolerance for any club claiming to be their equal. The Dirty Dozen were in a hard spot. They were tough, but they lacked the resources, to say nothing of the international reputation of the Hells Angels. The Dozen's members were given a choice: disappear or patch over to the Angels. Most enthusiastically chose the latter. Others hung up their cuts for good. Others sought Angels membership but were denied. These facts were significant. For a club to go from non-existent to the main show in the town in under 5 years proved to Slats that the Angels were wielding their influence ably and willfully. These are the types of bricks that RICO cases are built with. Historically, two main barriers had prevented law enforcement from wholeheartedly investigating the outlaw motorcycle gangs, or OMGs. On the high end, the bosses don't give them much credit as criminals. It's much more fashionable to go after volume dealers of drugs, arms, and explosives. If the bosses are more concerned with making a lot of cases, then it's easier to move up against small-timers like the Varvilles and Abrams of the world. Going after groups like the Hells Angels takes time, commitment, trust, risk, and money, a lethal recipe for a bureaucracy like ATF. On the low end is the fact that some biker investigations assimilate and sympathize with their adversaries. Some even form their own clubs. This has always been a mystery to me. Cops don't mimic mafia dons or dress as Crips and Bloods and form up neighborhood sets. So why would some choose to create their own motorcycle clubs patterned after criminal syndicates? Maybe it's because they're bound by the bikes themselves. One thing that cuts across all of them is the live to ride, ride to live credo. But I wouldn't know since I don't really love bikes. Go figure. Regardless of the reasons, these forces, a disregard for their legitimacy from above, and a wary respect and kinship from below, combine to give the bikers some semblance of a safe haven. Here's what I thought. Yes, guns and drugs ruin people's lives, but what truly ruins people's lives is violence, and violence was and is the source of the Hells Angels' power. In the coming months, as we meet to discuss the Angels, Slats expanded on this notion. He understood that outlaw bikers were easy to misconstrue as white, overweight, middle-aged illiterates who wore dirty bowling vests, drank beer, and sat around telling war stories about toothless hags they picked up on the side of the road. Not all of these guys were killers, rapists, or dopers. Slats knew that the majority of these guys had something in life, a job, a family, that restrained them. But he also knew that every outlaw who wore a three-piece patch had the potential for some serious ugliness. A small percentage of 1%ers was crazy, violent, and wired enough that all they did was dope, booze, and commit crimes. He also knew that, being brothers, this smaller group had a lot of influence over the larger, less volatile group. When you mix these guys with alcohol, drugs, guns, hammers, knives, and honor, and added a violent leader, then violence became the probable, even the preferred outcome of any conflict. They were like a Greek fraternity with guns. We all knew that when these guys felt comfortable, they were capable of horrible things. Rat pack beatings, assaults, stabbings, shootings, rapes. When it got bad, outlaw bikers fed off of each other for each other because, in their minds, all they had was each other. My thinking as a street cop has always been that I don't care who you are or what club you belong to. If you are being a violent asshole and engaging in illegal activity, then it's my job to try to arrest you. My feeling is that the OMGs are tailor-made for ATF, guns, explosives, drugs, and violence. These are the cornerstones of our mandate. I also believe that OMGs are America's only indigenous form of international organized crime. Mafias come from places like Italy, Russia, and Japan. Drug cartels issue from South America and Southeast Asia. Street gangs are local and not unique to this or any other country. But the bike gangs started here in the 40s and 50s with the Hells Angels at the forefront, and now they can be found on every continent in nearly half of the world's countries. The Hells Angels themselves have charters in 26 countries on 5 continents. Germany alone has more members than the United States, and it all started with the visionary guidance of one Ralph Sonny Barger in Oakland, California. For those reasons, I've always believed that investigating biker gangs was a worthwhile endeavor. And on April 27, 2002, my less than convinced colleagues would come to believe this too. The River Run didn't commemorate anything like incarcerated felons. It was merely a large biker rally in a Nevada casino town. It had been going on since 1983. It attracted corporate sponsors and big-time music acts. It featured custom bike contests, Miss Laughlin contest, lots of strippers, shaving cream and baby oil fights between said strippers, gambling, and general partying. The vast majority of the attendees were law-abiding citizens, but no run would be complete without the presence of the OMGs. They were idolized and highly respected, and since everyone loves being idolized and respected, they showed up in force. The Hells Angels were the stars of these events, but there were other gangs there too. Not to be at the same event as your rivals was the most cowardly of retreats, and no club willingly got shown up in this way. So it was that a Hells Angels rival, Southern California's Mongols, were in town too. These clubs had been in a violent feud for 30 years, but it had yet to explode into a full-blown war. In addition to the bikers, Laughlin was flush with cops. State and local guys were supplemented by feds like Ciclione and Slats. In support of them were Sugar Bear and me, plus some of my older undercover friends and colleagues like John Babyface Carr, Sean Spider-Man Hoover, and Darren Kaz Kozlowski. The support staff also included a young female recruit named Jenna JJ McGuire. Kaz teamed up with me on the night of April 27th. Kaz was a crazy, improvisational UC who always looked scary. He was famous for joking, "If I die on this job, I sure as fuck don't want it to be in a traffic accident or because I had a heart attack at my desk. I want to get hit by a bus on my motorcycle. I want to be duct taped to a chair and shotgunned in the face. I want those motherfuckers to cut off my head. I want the boys to say, 'Did you hear that? They cut Kaz's head off.'" We went to the Flamingo, which was where all of the Angels were staying. We went to a centrally located bar and took a couple of stools. Everyone eye fucked us. There were Hells Angels coming and going all around. JJ, in an observational role, sat at the end of the bar and watched while fighting off offers for free drinks and motorcycle rides. The situation in the casino was palpably tense. The Angels knew the Mongols were around. They expected a fight, but they didn't know where or when it would start. The Angels had sent spies to the Mongols' hotel and were convinced that the Mongols had returned the favor. No one seemed approachable, and I hadn't seen Smitty, the main guy I wanted to meet. After an hour of nursing beers, Kaz and I concluded that maybe it wasn't our night. That's when Smitty stopped at the bar a few stools down. He was by himself. He ordered a Crown Royal and a Coke. I knew I had to mind my P's and Q's. If I screwed up the intro, then Kaz and I would be at the bottom of the pile before we knew it, and any hope of establishing a rapport with the Angels would be nixed. I wasn't exactly scared. We had a cover team and there were cops everywhere, but I still had to look tough while being respectful. As for Kaz, he didn't care. He'd shoot it out like in an old western and love every minute of it. Kaz and I approached Smitty. Before we got close enough to make him uncomfortable, I said, "Excuse me, you're Smitty, right?" He turned to us. Something registered. He nodded owlishly and grinned. It was as though the line of his smile had been drawn on his face by a cartoonist. He said, "That's right. My name's Bird. This is my buddy Kaz." He nodded at Kaz but talked to me. "Yeah, I know who you are. Really? That's flattering." He said, "Well, the BHC's a small town," referring to Bullhead City. "Maybe, but the way I see it, you're looking like the mayor over here, and I'm barely a citizen." I didn't say anything, but it was obvious by the way he turned up the corner of his mouth that he was flattered too. I continued. "Anyway, I just wanted to introduce myself and say that I think you're doing a hell of a job hosting the party." Smitty smiled some more and finished his drink. I got the feeling he thought I wasn't much more than a groupie. He said, "Thanks, nice to meet you too, Bird. Hope to see you around." Then he walked back into the casino throng, civilians and Angels parting for his passing. Not long after he left, another Hells Angels with a Dago, San Diego, cut sat on the same stool, accompanied by some other Dago Angels. They all ordered beers. The guy who'd taken Smitty's seat was stocky and looked like a young Kris Kringle. Wavy hair, a long, wavy fanned-out beard, beady eyes, and rosy cheeks. I thrust my hand toward him and said, "Hey, I'm Bird from Bullhead City. Can I buy you a shot?" He shook my hand. "Hey, I'm Ramona P. No shot tonight, Bird, but thanks." He was very congenial, and we talked about the run for a few minutes while he drank his beer. As he finished, he flashed us a toothy smile and said, "Whenever you're in Dago, come see me at DeMont's Bar. Can't miss it. Site's right down the street from our clubhouse." We stayed at the bar well into the night. Smitty crossed the floor a couple more times, usually with other angels. One stood out in my memory, not only because of the way he looked, but because he whispered with Smitty on 2 occasions. The man was thin and twitchy. His flash, the small cloth patches stitched to the front of his cut, identified him as a Skull Valley member and as one of the filthy few. This meant he'd committed extreme violence on behalf of the club, most likely a murder. He had a mullet of swept back, battleship gray hair. He wore sunglasses and had buck teeth. Smitty and Rabbit disappeared from our radar for a while, but eventually they rejoined us next to a blackjack table not too far from where we sat. Smitty looked nervous and the Rabbit sweated visibly. His hands were shoved into his pants pockets and his elbows were locked. They spoke intently for about 5 minutes and then broke, the Rabbit briskly walking away. Smitty didn't look happy. He rejoined some angels at another blackjack table and nodded to the dealer, who stopped slinging cards. Smitty spoke to them quietly but purposefully. We turned our attention back to our drinks, playing it cool, pretending the angels weren't there and didn't matter to us. When we looked back to the blackjack table, the angels were gone. We looked around, all of the angels were gone. Kaz said, "What the fuck?" I shrugged. Something was up, we just didn't know what it was. We finished our drinks, paid the tab, and went outside. It was almost 2 a.m. As we walked to our bikes, police cruiser after police cruiser screamed down the Laughlin strip. Some people ran in the direction of the squad cars, but most ran against them. I could almost smell the craziness, as if trouble came with a hint of sulfur. Kaz said, "Well, I guess we know where the angels went. There's a long bar at the Harris Coughlin Casino and Resort called Rosie's Cantina. It's rectangular with purple columns at the corners. People huddle around it to play Keno and smoke long white cigarettes. It's surrounded by the usual American casino scene, ecstatic slot machines and dozens of video poker and blackjack consoles that play a dingling soundtrack dedicated to elusive cash. Mongols watered themselves around the bar. They were everywhere. They sat on stools and stood in their boots. They were decked in leather and denim. Their chests puffed like those of rare birds. Their backs twitched like those of horses. They acted as they always do, paranoid and defensive and conscious of their ability to intimidate. At the northern end of the bar, a small group of San Francisco Hells Angels tried to drink. Area Angels are as prideful as they come, since their ancestral line is shot directly into the golden days, their inheritance being Sonny Barger himself, the famed Bass Lake Runs, Angel Dust, and Altamont. The Mongols did not want the Angels there. Harris was their home turf. The Frisco Angels knew this, so they put out their surreptitious distress call and Smitty answered it. He went to Harris as an Angel undercover agent. No HA cut, no flash, just another dude surveying the lay of the land, seeing which table was bathed with the aura of Lady Luck. He stepped to the bar for a drink. A group of Mongols stood next to him. He overheard strands of their conversation. I can only imagine the bullshit insults that wafted from their lips. But it's not hard to do that. The Mongols would have called the Angels pinks, faggots, losers, cocksuckers. I'm sure Smitty heard it all, and I'm sure he didn't like it. He forced a broad smile and sipped his beer, wiping the suds from his mustache. He watched the far end of the bar where his Frisco brothers huddled. A group of Mongols orbited them. Something had to give. He walked away from the bar slowly and then, once out of sight, raced back to the Flamingo. He grabbed John Cowboy Ward and Rodney Cox and enlisted the Rabbit to help him muster the troops. He put his cut back on. Angels disappeared and re-emerged a little more flushed, a little redder with rage, a little more armed. 10 minutes passed. The group fired up in the parking lot. The rumble. They rode down the strip. Some double up, bitch style. They rode down the hill to Harris' main entrance. They kicked their stands and fired down. Few talked. There were about 30 of them. They ran into the lobby and turned right. Keys and metal clanked on their waistbands. As they passed the restaurant, they broke off and fanned into the machines. A group of 10 moved toward the bar, toward their stranded San Francisco brothers. The Mongols started to act like rats in a flood. Movement became jerky. Adrenaline was so abundant, it could have been put on sale. Hank and Mary Citizen were among the faded bikers playing their games. Some noticed, some thought, what the fuck? What left quickly? Several Several Hells Angels sat on their stools in front of a bank of slots and slipped items out of their vests and boots. Shiny things, dull things, wooden things, metal things. Some of these things made clinking sounds. Some of them were silent. Words were spoken. Pete Eunice from Dago, the one who'd been so nice and charming to us, tried to broker a truce. He didn't try too hard. The Hells Angels instinctively understand things other clubs don't. You can stitch all the patches you want and paste your chest high and low with them, telling the world you've killed for the club, you've eaten menstruating pussy, and you're a rapist and a gangbanger, you're a sergeant, you're a president, someone who's taken a bullet or a beating for the club, someone who's been given the opportunity to rat and hasn't, someone who's kicked the shit out of a cop. But those little pieces of rectangular flash don't mean a thing if you don't know how or when to kick, shoot, stab, or swing. The first guy to make a move, an angel named Ray Ray Folks, kicked a Mongol in the chest. A large group of people clung to these two as they fell away from the bar. People moved toward or away from the melee based on their allegiance, to themselves, away, to their brothers, toward. They fanned out, angels converged. Mongols got blindsided by hammers and mag lights. The hammers took cheeks and ears, the lights took necks and knees. Knives were pulled and resheathed through the ragged layers of bikers' sides and legs, only to be pulled back out into the recycled casino air, dripping with blood. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Guns were drawn and fired. The place danced. Concerned faces looked in every direction. Some Mongols got truly scared. They inched to the periphery, trying to avoid an angel in waiting, and hunkered by a twinkling slot. Most avoided contact. Once a safe distance was reached, some Mongols turned and ran. Others, fearing a larger assault, stripped their cuts and stuffed them into garbage cans and the spaces in between game machines. The angels stood their ground. More shots were fired. The gunplay created random spaces around the shooters. Pete Eunice was no longer trying to make truces. He was firing away. Smitty didn't have a gun, but he covered Pete. Another shooter was an angel named Cal Schaefer. No one covered him. When firing, he stabbed the gun into the air as if the target was within arm's reach. The flare lit up the muzzle and the slug let fly. He twirled around, looking for another target, then twirled around again. The barrel sang. No angel removed his cut, not one, especially not those killed. The Nestle's Quick Rabbit tried to revive one of his fallen brothers and gave him mouth-to-mouth on the casino floor. It didn't work. He hid his gun under the body of his fallen brother. The riot took less than 2 minutes, and it was there for all to see on video surveillance. Watching it later, I was struck by the hapless choreography of it. People moved together as if attached with invisible strings. Hands moved up at the same time, faces turned to the same spot, shoulders inched in the same direction. There was no sound on the tapes, which made the reactions all the more surreal. Everyone moved like a dumb organism, like a cell drifting through a teeming medium of life and liquid. It was very strange and even beautiful, but it was not beautiful. 3 were killed, 2 angels and 1 Mongol, and dozens were hospitalized. Later that night, another angel was gunned down on a dark desert highway outside town. Average tourists and workers were traumatized, but miraculously uninjured. The Laughlin riot remains the worst case of casino violence in Nevada history, a brazen act completely disrespectful of authority or the threat of death or imprisonment. A challenge to us, the people who are supposed to protect the public. A challenge to me, who felt even more compelled to use Bird against some truly violent sons of bitches. The Laughlin riot remains the worst case of casino violence in Nevada history, a brazen act completely disrespectful of authority or the threat of death or imprisonment. A challenge to us, the people who are supposed to protect the public. A challenge to me, who felt even more compelled to use Bird against some truly violent sons of bitches.